Hello, I'm Kaylee and I write fantasy and science fiction.
And I'm Erin and I write fantasy fiction and poetry.
And today we are talking about world building. Woo, so exciting. So I guess we'll just get right into it. Erin, where do you start with world building?
So world building is not usually one of the first things I'm thinking about with a story. Usually I kind of see like it's kind of an afterthought once I start writing it. I'm like, they have to be somewhere.
Where do these people live?
Yeah, what are the bounds here? So where I start with it is really just figuring out like what are the main things that need to happen in this story and what kind of environment is needed for those to happen. With the current story I'm working on, this is definitely the most like world building I've ever had to do. And what was really helpful was I actually had a lot of different ideas for stories that kind of seemed like they could happen in a similar area. So I just kind of decided that they all did.
Nice.
And then was just kind of like, okay, what's required? Like what terrain have I kind of imagined for this story and this one, and kind of tried to like build a map that way. And then also just trying to think of, just other features that might be necessary. So honestly, it's been more like plot driven world building. And then, so as a starting point, it's really just like trying to figure out what's necessary for that story to be possible, and then building a world that has those features. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. How about you?
I don't know. I feel like I jump back and forth between a lot of different things. I think with world building, I think sometimes I start with like I think of world building and like magic system building and setting. They're like all the same. All those are under world building, I guess. Magic systems under world building. So I think I do start with like an idea or like a concept of a world before I start necessarily with the concept of a plot or a character. But I also, as I go along, I change it based off of the plot. Because like my world for my current project has, like, one thing I had from the beginning was like this little pantheon of like 5 gods. And originally things were a little bit more Greek inspired, and like they were in this nation where, they had the pantheon. But after I wrote the first draft and kind of figured out more of the story I wanted to tell, I was like, no, actually, I think I need there to be more conflict between the people who worship the different gods and like between the people who have the different types of magic. So I changed the world to be, okay, no, who you worship and what magic you have is somewhat geographically based. And like the country the main characters are in only worships this one goddess. So that was an example of where like I started with an idea of the world building, and then I had the story, and then after the story, I went back and changed the world. It's a very recursive process, the recursive writing thing that people talk about. Yeah, and it's interesting because my husband does a lot of D&D, and so we've talked about this too a little bit, because as a dungeon master, he starts with, that's kind of how he makes stories, is only in the world of D&D. He doesn't write. So he's always like, I start with the world, and then the characters do things in the world. So when he thinks about he was kind of surprised when I was talking about my writing process of like not basing the plot and the characters off of the world and allowing them to kind of feed back into each other in that way. So it's just like an interesting thing, I guess.
Yeah. You got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, indeed. Yeah,
for sure. So what kind of challenges do you usually run into when world building?
I think when I started my book, I think I thought that I didn't world build enough. I thought I was not a world builder. And I've since learned that I very much am a world builder, but I thought that I wasn't, because I was like, well, I don't know their like coin system and their economics, and like there's all these things that like people on like our world building, on like the world building subreddit, like they do all this stuff, and like again, if you play D&D with people, there's all these things you can get into. And I was like, I don't have all the tiny minutiae, so I'm not a world builder. I still don't build out those tiny minutiae, but I've since realized that I don't need those for my story. And I think now my challenge is making sure I have enough of the world for the story without using it as an excuse to like stop or like being too caught up in, oh, well, this should have a reason and this should have a reason. It's like, well, no, it doesn't, you know, the iceberg thing, like I can go too deep. So I think that is now my new challenge with world building. And I think I do wish for this project that I had spent, well, I don't know, I almost kind of wish I spent more time world building up front, because I world built a lot, like the world changed a lot as it went along, but I don't know. So yeah, but I think I can get stuck. I think that's gonna be my answers. I can get stuck in world building. Yeah.
Gotcha.
How about you?
I think the main thing that intimidates me with world building and kind of makes me not want to do it a little bit is not knowing what I don't know about the world. Because like you mentioned the coin system kind of thing, and I'm thinking, I kind of, like when you said that, I kind of realized like, oh, when world building, it's like, I tapped the mic. We'll see how that turns out.
Yeah.
Like I don't have a super in-depth understanding of how everything in our own world works.
Right.
As far as like the economic system and like, I don't know, maybe it's bad to say that I'm ignorant of that online, but like I am. And so it's just kind of being like, oh man, like, do I have to, for the world to be an engaging thing in this story, do I really have to know every single thing about it? Do I really have to be the god of this little imaginary world? And so I think that kind of like turns me away from world building sometimes, but then with this story, like as the plot has kind of informed it and as the characters and the cultures that I kind of want them to be coming from have informed it, like it's been easier to kind of, like you were saying as well, like see what is necessary for this story to be told in a way that makes sense and has like the details you need fleshed out to kind of figure out like, you know, the history and like in the level of depth that's really needed. So yeah. So I would just say like kind of being like not knowing all the things that are actually required of me to successfully world build kind of just makes it a little difficult. But I think, I don't know, just kind of learning is kind of also a recursive thing of like, it's not going to be the same for every story.
Yeah, that's true.
And every world. So yeah.
True. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So on that note, how far do you currently go when trying to world build?
So let's see. So I am not really worried about the parts of the world that don't impact that story. So like the story I'm writing right now and all the ones that I said might be kind of connected to it, it's going to be on like, you know, a continent or two continents. And there is a world that exists there, but I mean, maybe one day I'll figure out like the whole planet, but I'm not like going that far. I'm really just like, okay, what do we need to tell this story? And then as far as I have gone with this one is really just figuring out like the history behind how the characters got to where they are, but also the history behind how the countries at play, like the tensions and the events that have caused them to have the like culture or attitude that they have, or the prejudices they have against the other countries. Just figuring out like what are the tensions and the conflicts and why are those that way, and why do the physical aspects of those countries kind of support those tensions a little bit. So I haven't gone like super in depth. I think as far as like the history of the area, I've got like a few centuries back.
That seems pretty good.
So, but it's kind of light. It's like, it's not like they were jam-packed centuries. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know. It's not super complex, but yeah, just kind of figuring out like, I guess the main kind of like specifics are like the historical events, the geography of that area, like the resources they have and the relationship they have with the other kind of countries. And then I guess if magic plays into the world building, I mean, like I have a magic system. I'm still trying to like refine the like limitations and how it works, but I don't have, like, I haven't gone as far to figure out why does this magic system exist in this world though? Like, I'm just kind of like letting them be independent, which we'll find out if that's bad later. We'll find out if that doesn't work, but that's kind of the approach I'm taking right now. We'll see if it changes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think this is, yeah, I guess it just depends on if it works for the story, but I feel like in Lord of the Rings, like if you don't read the Silmarillion and you just read Lord of the Rings, you're like, why is Gandalf a wizard?
I'm not really worried about it.
Yeah. Especially in The Hobbit, he's just a wizard.
You're like, and it's fun, and that's awesome.
He's just a wizard.
Yeah. What about you? How far do you go with world building?
I think, I don't know. In my mind, it's one of those things where it's like, it's hard to judge your own stuff, because I think I could go, again, like I said, I think sometimes I go too far, but I still feel like I could go further, which I don't think is necessary, or even like no one who I've, aside from like the very, very early drafts that like only my husband read and he only read pieces of it, since those I haven't gotten any critiques on like world building not making sense. So I don't think I actually need to go further, but like in my mind I'm like, oh, but you could explore this. So yeah, I'm trying to think what areas I fleshed out and like how to explain it. So like, I don't know. It's hard to think of like where I started. I guess I really like fantasy stuff with religion in it. I think that's really interesting. So the religion parts are pretty fleshed out. Again, I feel like they could be more fleshed out, but whatever. Like part of me wants to be the person who like writes religious text for the religions in the but like that's so unnecessary. Nobody's reading them in the book, or it's off screen. So I've got the religions figured out. I think I have like, the politics and stuff are pretty important. And a lot of it is in the background in the first book, because my two main characters are just kind of regular guys. So they're not aware of some of the higher up political machinations, but I'm aware of them, so that for later books, that will affect the story. I kind of tried to go, I guess, until I feel like satisfied, until I get to a point where I'm like reading and I'm like, okay, this makes sense. And whenever I get to a point where I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense anymore, that's when I'm like, okay, there needs to be more work done here. And I feel like this is best illustrated with an example, because I'm like struggling to explain what I mean. Okay, so an example is, in my book, people have magics to control the elements, and they will turn into a monster unless they get a rune on their hand to stop the process, which is called wilding. And I wanted there to be people in the main country that they're in who have wilded, who don't have the rune, right? But obviously, if magic turns you into a monster and there's a rune you can get to protect it, everybody's going to get that rune. So I was like, well, why wouldn't people have that rune? And the only reason I wanted there to be people who had wilded was for the cool scenes. But I was like,
they are cool.
Yeah, I was like, I gotta have these cool scenes, but there has to be a reason for it. Otherwise, it like when I read books and they have like people obviously making choices that hurt them, I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense, and that takes me out of it. So at first I thought, okay, well, maybe everyone with the magic has to be conscripted. And so people who don't get the rune are like conscientious objectors. And then I was like, that also still doesn't make sense, because even if you have a moral, the amount of people who will choose to become a inhuman monster for their morals is very, very small. Like, I feel like you are more likely to have someone face death than face that, It's a really horrible fate. So instead I was like, okay, there must be some limited resource that the runes come from. So they come from this, you have to have a certain metal, and this country is very low on that type of metal. So you have to be, your rune has to be subsidized by the government or the church. And the government and the church don't necessarily want everyone. So most of the people who have become, so most of the people who are becoming corrupted are people who are like disabled or like developmentally different or stuff like that, which makes it all the more tragic, but also that answers that question of like, okay, why didn't these people get the rune? So that's how I know how far to go in world building, I guess. Yes. I'm like, once it makes sense like that, I'm like, okay. So that's like a little bit of an insight into how I world build. That was really long.
Right. But just kind of like making sure you can answer the why when it matters.
Yes.
Yeah, like we're not worried about why Gandalf is a wizard, but we're worried about why the ring is important.
Yes, or like why, like the fact that like why is Gollum the way that he is? Yes. Like the way Gollum is inherently connected to the way the ring is. Yeah. Because if it was just like, oh, the ring makes you powerful and like corrupts you, you'd maybe be like, oh, well, but why would Gollum choose to become this like little weird little guy?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, because it's also like messes with your mind.
Yes.
It, like sucks you in.
Yeah. So we may have already kind of touched on this, but just in case. So how much of the world building that you do actually shows up in the book?
I think the majority of it shows up in the book, mostly because whenever I world build something new, I'm like, oh, so exciting. Let me put that in there. Like the people need to know that this is how this works. And I think also like the world building, like earlier, I think I said the plot really informs the world building for me, but also the world building does inform the plot. So like I'll change plot things based off of world building decisions. But I do have some things that never make it into the book. Like there's this like skeleton at one point, and like I know exactly who that guy was, and like I think I have a name for him and a little bit of a backstory, but like nobody's ever gonna know. He's just a skeleton, unless I write a short story or something. And then I also have like in my book, you know, their magic is elemental, but I was trying to be different from The Last Airbender, so they can't create their stuff out of nothing. So fire callers can't like make fire. So the fire caller in it has like a little lighter, and like I figured out like how the lighter works specifically to make sure it fit with the technology of the book, but like it's never mentioned because he's not going to just. I mean, it wouldn't be out of character for him to be like, this is how this works, but nobody asks him. So the reader's not going to know the specifics that I spent like 4 hours like trying to figure out how this lighter could work. So most of the world building, I would say like 80% is probably ends up in the book.
Okay.
I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, he would jump at the opportunity.
No, he would. He would be very excited if someone asked, but no one's going to ask him. So.
No.
Yeah. How about you? How much of your world building... I know you're still drafting, but like how much do you think is going to be in the book?
Yeah, so it's kind of weird because the point that I go to when I stop world building is how much do I need to know for this to make sense? So that also kind of makes it to where most of it that I've actually done is going to show up. The history, like the farther back history of the area, probably not going to make it in there. A ton, like the tension, it's really just like, I know that so that there's a reason for these people to dislike each other. So that isn't necessarily, it's not like there shouldn't be a lot of like details about that dropped in there unless it's actually relevant for the conversations the characters are having. So probably, as far as like the things that are like the geography and the magic system, I would say most, if not all, of what I've like determined at this point is going to show up there. But yeah, the actual like, I don't know, like cultural things, it's going to be a little bit. There's also the main characters are also from places that are not where the story takes place. So there's a lot of history and culture that I've kind of designed around that as well that isn't going to really show up. Not all of their backstory. I feel like snippets of their backstory is going to get dropped in there, but it's really just going to come out in their relationships now more than it is going to be like specifically mentioned what exactly happened, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, like you kind of pointed out, I'm still drafting it, so I'm not 100% sure. I could end up kind of doing what you did and being like, well, this is really cool and I want to work it in. Yeah, because like the magic system, I'm like, well, the main character, spoiler alert, not herself a magic user. So I haven't worked it in, but it's one of those things where I have to like kind of be like, I have to like really keep that in mind to be like, okay, we have to show this though, because it is a part of the world, but it is like, you know, kind of hard to remember like, oh, but like, how would it actually be something that you experience if you just kind of lived there? So I'm kind of still working on that part.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing with world building too, is like there's, because sometimes there's the world as it exists, and then there's how your characters perceive the world.
Yes.
Which does not always line up, which is interesting thing to deal with. Yeah.
So we'll see. Cool.
Okay, so that's what we have to say about world building. If you have any questions for us, please leave them in the comments. And also if you have, if you want to share how you world build, we would love to read it. Yeah. So thanks for watching.